This is my update on Ukraine military chaplains and the retreat that I just attended, which was hosted by UA Ant, my long running partners. It was authorized by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense through their chaplaincy department. It was also blessed by Metropolitan Epiphanius, who is the head of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. This is very significant for us because Orthodoxy is the majority religion in Ukraine. We had 9 Orthodox priests and 2 Protestants. We didn't have any Muslim or Jewish priests, and the other significant thing is we didn't have any Greek Catholic priests, which Greek Catholicism is the second largest denomination within Ukraine. So I'm going to run through some of the issues and give you the update as far as by video instead of writing it all down this time. I feel I owe it to you, and I'm also trying to change my format a little bit. So first, we're going to talk about symbols. Now, symbols within all religions are important. Symbols within governments are used a lot for ideology. I don't know if we want to call it ideology. I guess it is, as far as Orthodox Christianity goes. And Christianity in general, you know, we all know this symbol, which for some, it's this, while for others, it's without Jesus on the cross. But the symbol, the cross, is the same. For us within Orthodoxy, we have our icons. These are my travel ones that I take with me. I actually bought this at Durham Cathedral in Durham, UK. Now, the other thing, we were dealing with military chaplains, so there were other symbols involved, and they honored me by giving me some of those symbols. I want to show those to you. This is the unit of one of the fathers. This is the unit of one of the others as well. I think this might be the pastor's unit. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look at the photos about who presented it to me. This is especially meaningful to me because this is for decontamination from chemical warfare, and that was what I did in the U.S. Army Reserves when I first joined. And it meant something to the father who gave it to me as well. Now, the other symbol that we're going to talk about today is the one that was hit last night by the Russians, the Kiev Pechersk Lavra. It's a huge symbol for Slavic Orthodoxy. The Russians claim Kiev to be the mother of all Russian cities, which all of us here in Ukraine know is not really true. They are more sons and daughters of the Khans than they are of Orthodoxy. They just eventually adopted Orthodoxy. They were made as a collection point to serve the Khans when they came to collect for not destroying everything once they had taken over. Okay. Now, I sat in on a few sessions with the priests and pastors, and I want to relate some of the problems that came up within that. The first we're going to talk about is, and I'm reading off of notes here so that I'm accurate, is relational strain and estrangement, because civilians cannot grasp the realities of what's happening for the chaplains and for the soldiers. So it creates a misunderstanding of what's happening within the war, within the family, within the chaplains, within the soldiers. So the wives and the children feel misunderstood often, and often the soldiers themselves and the chaplains sometimes feel abandoned. Number 2 is civilian transition conflict. So the chaplains themselves and the soldiers have a hard time switching from survival mode to just mundane domestic responsibilities. Spouses aren't, they may feel the soldier is no longer needed or struggle to support their reintegration if they come off the front permanently. Like the spouses have learned to do much on their own. Okay, the next one, number 3, is public perception and stigma. There's a deep fear that current sacrifices will be forgotten or recontextualized as criminal action. And what's going on currently within the war is that soldiers face mockery from civilians who trivialize their service as military tourism or going on a camping trip. And this happens, and I've had friends that it's happened to. And we have to face the reality that not everybody knows each other's realities. Number 4 is substance abuse as a coping mechanism, which I don't know how much the chaplains engage in this, but they're dealing with this with the guys on the front because it's the only way that they can sort of drown their sorrows right now, and that's what they're doing, and they're going to excess on it on a regular basis. This is common with all soldiers, including myself. I probably overindulge more than I should. So what happens with the soldiers, with the chaplains themselves as well, is they struggle to reestablish their identity within the family, often as the head of the household, because the spouses no longer need them. Now, I'm just briefly going through these because there's much more depth here, and I'm doing this in cooperation not only with UAANS, but with Coriolis Institute, so that we can understand this and the problems that are coming, the problems that currently exist, what can be done to address them now, and what we're doing at ANTS. This is really important. I spoke a lot with a partner about this. What we're doing right now with ANTS are these short-term retreats, which are helping now. This is short-term relief for the soldiers, for the families, for the children, for the spouses, for everybody involved. Long-term, it will become different. But right now, within the war, within an active war, the short term is extremely important because it just takes that stress level down. It reopens communication between the soldiers and their families and sort of keeps the relationship going, as difficult as that can be. So what are the other things that the chaplains themselves and the soldiers are going to face is the dignity versus disgrace dilemma. Choosing to serve is often a choice of dignity and conscience. But the paradox that they run into is that doing the right thing for the country often looks like doing the wrong thing for the family. And that's a difficult perception to overcome. The other one following upon that, number 7, is the incompatibility of realities. The soldiers try to protect their families by not telling them all of the details that they see, hear, and experience. And this leads the family to think that he or she is leading this easy life, having picnics and tourism, as they named it. And this is also the same with other civilians who are looking and calling them war tourists and out on the camping trip with the boys. And what follows after that is number 8, and it's the last major issue that we addressed in just this one session. This is just one of the sessions. I didn't take notes for all of them. I just wanted to take one, but there's a multitude of problems that exist for the chaplains and for the soldiers, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute as well. Number 8 is legacy and reputation. And this is the worry that they're going to fail to manage their post-war conduct. And that means to drink or just to act crazy. And that society will then label them as drunks and not heroes. So what we came up with within the session was some suggestions and pastoral approaches. And number one, this was the number one, and I didn't come up with this. Reframing the narrative, which is what I'm doing with the narrative processing program, helping people to reframe the narrative. And the big thing for them at this point was the reframing of the narrative for them is the fulfillment of masculine and official duties, not a whim, but the fulfillment of their duties as men. So another one was preparation for reintegration, preparing now within the war, not after, not waiting for it to be over, which is what we're doing with ANTS. That's why we're holding these retreats, because they're working, or at least that's what we're hearing from the participants during and long after, that it helps. But we probably have to bring some of them back as the war goes on. So soldiers have to be proactive in their return and recognize that the old dynamic within the family no longer exists. So they have to adjust to that new dynamic with their independent spouses, whether it's wives or husbands. One of the ways that we agree to this, and this is another thing that falls along what I've been talking about with narrative processing, is peer-to-peer intervention. Accountability, peer-to-peer accountability, teaching others how to be accountable soldier to soldier. And this could also be applied to the wives. You could have wives groups or spouses groups as well. And to reframe the narrative within that and maintain the character of duty and honor to be recognized as heroes and not as finished drunks. Okay, the next thing that they really touched on was that they need to have empathy for the home front. I thought this was really impressive and important. Well, and then again, they're chaplains, and they're trying to do that for themselves and for the soldiers that they treat. And to recognize that their wives or their spouses increase responsibility in the logistics, administrative, and financial responsibility of the family. And to recognize that their spouses were unprepared for this. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the military chaplaincy in Ukraine. It's relatively new, and it's really only developing on a full-scale basis within the full-scale invasion. And what I try to stress to them is that in the U.S. military, we hold our chaplains in very high regard. They are not having that same experience because a lot of the soldiers who are out there on the line don't understand why the chaplain is an officer, for one, and doesn't have a weapon and doesn't fight. So that's one of the big things that they have to overcome in the trenches or in the basements or wherever they are serving on the line. And the other thing is that they're not getting a lot of psychological training on how to deal with soldiers. They're passing things off to the psychologists, whereas a theologian should have some understanding of psychology, because they need to understand if the person has a moral injury, spiritual problem, or just simply a psychological problem, or a combination of both. And we, within the Orthodox Church, we have a lot of resources for this. This is the Inner Way. It's toward a rebirth of Eastern Christian spiritual direction, because that's essentially what the chaplains are, is giving spiritual direction to the soldiers. Now, within the Orthodox Church, liturgy is very important, but it runs a little over an hour, and you can't have that an hour ceremony or ritual in an open field, for one. You can only have a few guys in an underground bunker. Ritual is important, but what's most important is that spiritual direction. And it's super important that they get the pastoral counseling that they need the soldiers do, and that the chaplains are actually educated in that. And I don't think that they're getting as much as they should, based on the conversations that I overheard and in the sessions that I attended. We have this one. It's called The Inner Way by Bishop Kalisios Ware. We have, this is one of the three-part series called The Therapy of Spiritual Illnesses by Dr. Jean-Claude Larcher. This is, it's Orthodox focused, but it doesn't have to necessarily be Orthodox in nature. Any chaplain could use it from a religious perspective. The big one that I've depended on myself within this war is called Orthodox Psychotherapy, and it's by Metropolitan of Nafpaktos Hierotheos. He's Greek Orthodox. Really, Orthodox doesn't matter whether you're Greek, Ukrainian, Bulgarian. Orthodoxy is the same across the board in its belief systems, except, of course, with the Russians. They've turned it into something else. It's really not going to go into that. There are scholars out there who are studying it and who are reporting on it and talking about it. And then the Metropolitan who wrote the Orthodox Psychotherapy, he also wrote this one. It's called The Science of Spiritual Medicine. It's also a guidebook for how to use orthodoxy and how to get through different levels of stress, things of that nature. And he gives examples from actual saints, the meaning and method of healing, spiritual health, spiritual tuning, the problem of idleness, the value of work. He addresses a lot of things that would help the soldiers. So what I'm trying to do here is I told the chaplains when we sat there together with just the chaplains and the psychiatrists that they are doctors of the soul, essentially. We have a lot of people with scarred souls, including the chaplains, including many civilians, things of that nature. But we also need a corpsman of the soul. And a corpsman, if you don't know the terminology, is really a combat medic. It's what we call them in the Marine Corps. They're actually U.S. Navy trained medics, because the Marine Corps doesn't actually have its own medics. We use the Navy's medics because we're actually a part of the U.S. Navy, which a lot of Marines don't like to admit. However, I look at myself now as a corpsman of the soul with narrative processing. I'm teaching a very, very specific, systematic way of processing through difficult memories, one event at a time at a nonfiction level. Now, my partner, Barbara Nicholas, she does a longer sessions with U.S. veterans where they go into fiction and documentary poetry and even playwriting, things of that nature. Here in the live war zone, I strictly stick to nonfiction because, well, I'm a nonfiction author, for one. And we really need to get to the root of the problems and start digging those out in the beginning so that they don't fester. It's a wound. It's a scar on the soul. And I'm not a psychologist. It does help with the healing of the mind from what I understand. But really, I'm more focused on the healing of the soul. So that's my take. There are a few of you out there who actually supported this financially, and I'm greatly appreciative to you. Also appreciative to UAANTS for letting me come out and present. I'm also grateful to Aaron McPhee and the Coriolis Institute for bringing me on as an advisor, and hoping to just continue moving forward, because this thing is not going away. It's only getting worse. And we're doing everything in our power within Ukraine, all kinds of us, different organizations, different NGOs, different Christian, I guess, organizations, some churches, some just NGOs. We're doing everything we can to resolve this, but there's just so many who are not being reached and not being helped. So I thank you, and that's my report. I'll have more to talk about, because one of the things that we're looking at is the importance of chaplains as far as ideology goes, to maintain that the core tenets of morals and ethics, and the dangers that we in Ukraine face within the war and possibly post-war.